On a Sphere's Edge. Written by Keith Mosher. Narrated by Keith Mosher. Chapter 5. Truth or Dare. The Skyhopper's glide path sunk lower as it banked toward an available landing pad, with 20s Town clearly in view. Gliders, like any winged aircraft, require runways to take off and land, but Skyhoppers are different. About 1,000 feet over the pad, the wings collapsed, and the engine took over for a slow, controlled, almost vertical descent. It touched down on the pad with scarcely a sound, much less a bump. The doors opened, and its computer said,
20th Town, the Library and Tea Club, 15 credits billed to...
Zeal reached inside his coat and pulled out his cell, tapped it a few times, and then replied, Bogey, and then tapped the hopper's dashboard with his cell. The computer replied,
15 credits paid.
Zeal and Novastra exited the craft. As they walked toward the pad archway, Novastra asked, Bogey? Zeal did not respond. Once through the archway, they were standing on a sidewalk beside a street in an excellent facsimile of a busy city in early 20th century Earth, either North America or Europe. Most of the people on the sidewalks were 3P guests. Across the street was a store with a quaint sign, the Library and Tea Club. Zeal looked at Novastra and gave a large, swooping gesture with his hand toward the establishment. Alex was not aware, but sensors were calculating her position and movements, preparing to give her, like all visitors, the show she came to see. As she crossed the street, a rumbling vehicle on wheels came out of nowhere. It came to a screeching halt in front of her and blared some sort of horn. A very lifelike automaton leaned out the window and yelled, Why don't yous watch where you're going? Alex was stunned. She looked back at Zeal, who stood on the sidewalk with a big grin on his face. The car swerved around Alex and sped on its way, disappearing around a corner. Zeal stepped onto the street and walked casually past Novastra and into the Library and Tea Club. She followed after him. Having gotten over the shock of the attraction's surprise, she mused how the accent of the automaton, while thicker and more pronounced, was reminiscent of Zeal's unique form of pronunciation. Upon entering the shop, it took Alex a few moments to comprehend what she was seeing. It was an old-style library. She had seen photos and vids in history class, but she had never actualized the idea. Shelves upon shelves of paper books. It was odd for her. For Alexandria, a library had always been a concept, not a place. Tap on a console or cell and download whatever type of information was needed from the intergalactic library. She had been in a few stores that sold data chips and holo wafers, but it was a matter of requesting the book or holo, and it was downloaded and imprinted on the spot. No shelves, no racks, nothing but a console and a clerk. And often the clerk wasn't a living being. In the middle of the main library room was a wraparound counter. Standing within it was a full-figured, firm, and shapely woman. She smiled as soon as she saw Zeal, and scowled when she saw Novastra so close behind him. Well, Mr. Katz, look what you've dragged in. She stepped out from behind the counter and positioned herself between Alexandria and Zeal. Oh, Zeal, give up these puny things, will ya? Besides, this one's not your type at all. What you need is a real woman. You know that, don't you, honey? She ran her hand up and down Zeal's chest. Zeal took her hand and kissed it lightly.
I know, Eliza. You are the only woman for me. If I ever do settle down, which we both know won't happen, it'll probably be with you. But for the moment, this little fly interests me.
Zeal winked at Eliza and then turned to Novastra.
Alexandria Novastra, this is Eliza Beth, owner and operator of the Library and Tea Club, one of the best bars in all of 20s Town, hell, in all of 3P in my book.
There was a look between Eliza and Zeal that suggested what went on between them was all in fun, but at times the fun they had could be a little serious. Eliza smiled at Zeal. "The usual for you and your new pet, ZZ?" Zeal returned the smile.
Not yet. We'll look at some books first, okay?
"Anything for you, honey." Eliza winked at Zeal, glowered at Alex, and then moved behind her counter to attend to a customer that had approached. Zeal led Novastra to a small table covered with some kind of large, colorful pamphlets. He took a seat and studied Novastra carefully as she sat across from him. Shooting a look of futility at her, he snatched up one of the pamphlets. Novastra looked over the establishment while Zeal idly turned pages. Shelves upon shelves, all crammed with books. Big, small, thick, thin, bright-colored and drab. It was a cornucopia for the visual sense. The modern library concept paled in comparison. After a few seconds of turning pages, Zeal looked up and leered at her.
Well, cut to the chase.
"What?" she asked, perplexed.
Spill the beans. What's your beef? What do you want?
Zeal punctuated this last question with clean pauses between each word. He enjoyed playing with antique phrases, and he was good at it, good at using them to keep people off balance, and good at using them to let people know his feelings. In this case, he was both suspicious and ticked off. "Well, it isn't as simple as that." Alex felt unsure. Was this the right thing to do? She and the Sphere had decided it was, but she felt uneasy about it. Perhaps it was the right thing to do, but was this the right time and place? It felt too difficult, even wrong, to just blurt it all out. "I mean, I can't just tell you like that. This is difficult for me." She shuffled in her seat. To give herself a break, she changed the subject. "ZZ? And what is that?" She pointed to the pamphlet Zeal perused.
Zeal cats.
Zeal elongated the Z in Zeal and the S sounding Z in cats.
It's called a magazine. Hasn't been one of these printed in more than 200 years. These are replicas. Museum quality, I might add. But you didn't come all this way to ask me that.
He closed the magazine and sat back. He crossed his legs and with a disappointed gesture slapped the magazine across his knee.
I'm getting bored with your little game. Tell me what you came here for, or I'm leaving you right here.
With that he pointed a finger at Novastra.
And I assure you, if I leave now, you will never see me again.
She knew he was serious. She had learned enough to know if Zeal wanted to completely disappear from her, he could. She had to get a hook into him, and perhaps the best way to do that was to cast him a line. Feeling vulnerable, she leaned forward and opened her hands toward him. "Zeal, I need your help. I need to drop out of the system and avoid the affiliate and the fleet." Zeal began to laugh. His laugh was deep, bright, and heartwarming. He laughed, stopped, and looked Novastra over, and then laughed again.
What? You need my help to avoid the fleet? How can you avoid what you are? Why would you want to avoid them? Got too many traffic tickets? Besides, you're an officer. You know how they work better than I do.
His sixth sense was telling him something, but he could not figure out what it was. He craftily brushed the magazine across his chest in the act of flinging it open. The motion allowed him, with a habitual sleight of hand, to secretly pull out his cell unit and hide it inside the magazine as he opened it.
This stinks. Either you are setting me up for something, or I'm a fool.
He propped the open magazine up in front of him so he could observe it and Novastra as well as his cell, which was hidden from her and everyone else for that matter. Alex was not surprised at Zeal's reaction. She elected to jiggle the bait. She sat back in her seat and adopted the same assured position that he had. "I know you find it hard to believe or understand, but the fleet is after me, and you're right, I'm a cop, as you would say. but I am a uniformed officer. I know everything there is to know about the fleet's frontal approaches. I haven't done a lot of undercover work, but even if I had, I don't have much time." She began to play with one of the magazines. "I have credits I can transfer, Zeal. Why I need help is unimportant to you. That I am willing to pay for your help should be all that matters. I need to disappear today. I can't even buy lunch without using an affiliate credit ID and leaving a trace. I need fake IDs and fake credit codes. I need contacts. That's why I came looking for you. You are one of the best, and I am willing to pay for your help." Zeal eyed Novastra carefully. There was something that clicked, something that seemed to pull at him, but it was not the promise of payment. He decided to test her, or rather test his judgment.
"Hell, just hopscotch around. Your little fines or whatever no-nos you've done will fall through the cracks in a few months."
Alex felt frustrated. Either she was not setting the hook or he was not taking the bait. With a quick lunge, she leaned on the table. No, you don't understand. A few months, hell, a few decades won't be long enough. I have got to permanently drop out of the system." When she said this, her heart sank. This was not short term. Her old life was indeed over. Apparently it had been for a couple of days, but only now did she fully realize it. She felt hurt and shaken. Trying to display composure, she leaned back in her chair. "I'm talking a deal here, Zeal. You can't be earning as much as a straight man, not like what you're used to. I'm not asking for much, just a name or two, false codes, you know the tricks." Zeal sensed she was hiding some hurt, but he was not yet done with his testing.
"You still can't make me bite, Novastra. Why should I help you? All I see is risk for me and kudos for you. I have no reason to trip myself up. If it hadn't been for that little girl on Iota Piscium 5, I might still be practicing my craft rather than trying to keep clean."
He studied his cell as much as he studied Novastra. The EM readings it was getting from her were odd and partially confused. Some of the deeper, more isolated scans were very strong, but the EM readings that pertained to Novastra herself, her brainwave patterns, capillary responses, heart and respiration rates all indicated something he had not expected to see. Alex could tell that Zeal was fishing for something. Despite the fact that her past was now passed on, she remained determined. "Little girl, Katz, you know very well it was a boy that ran out in the road." Zeal could see in Novastra a lot more than she was telling. His keen, trained senses told him that she was hurt, confused, and frightened. In conjunction with his senses, he relied on his resourcefulness. His carefully hidden cell was telling him two important things. First, while he knew she was holding something back, a quick scan of all the readings taken since he had activated it back in Moon's Landing showed that she had not lied once, and that surprised him. Secondly, the cell was reporting something odd tucked away in her bag. He guessed this was part of Novastra's problem with the fleet. While this secret made him suspicious, it also made him curious enough to keep her on his hook for a little while at least.
"Okay, thank your reputation. I'll play along."
He flung the magazine on the table, spiriting away his cell as he did, and then rose from his seat.
"You seem to need some kind of help, so here's the deal. Get yourself a room. There's a nice little place here in 20s just a block down the road. Get your room and meet me back here in 2 hours."
Alex was vexed. She rose from her seat to face him. "A room? What are you talking about? There's no time for that. Come on, Zeal, just give me a contact or two. Name your price." Zeal, in frustration, turned away from her and headed toward the main desk. Alex was afraid she would lose him. She reached out and grabbed his arm. "Zeal, come on, help me out. The fleet will catch up to me in 4 or 5 hours. I can't get a room without using my credit codes, without leaving a trail."
"Exactly," said Zeal as he spun around, pointing at her. "Right now, you're as easy to track as a dreadnought through a garden party. I do not need the risk, and frankly, I don't need your credits either. They would only mark me as aiding a criminal, which I do not need. If you want my help, you will get a room, and then meet me back here in 2 hours, and everything will be fine. But if you are setting me up, I want the fleet to find you, not me."
He turned and proceeded to the main desk, his walk more casual and lighthearted as he physically left Novastra behind and headed toward Eliza. Alex accepted his offer. It made sense. Zeal was just protecting himself, and that was fair enough. She followed him back to the main desk, and then proceeded on to the door. Zeal kept his back toward her as he and Eliza entered into comfortable small talk. When Alex reached the door, she turned around and loudly asked, "Katz, I thought you said this was the best bar in 20s Town." Eliza looked around Zeal, raised a finger to her mouth, and sternly whispered, "Shh! This is a library." Zeal leveled a stern look over his shoulder toward Novastra, and then turned back to Eliza to continue their chit-chat. Alexandria walked down the sidewalk, hardly noticing the various attractions, souvenir shops, gaming arcades where people could play out old-world fantasies, and mock stores where guides or automatons described life on Earth half a millennium ago. She found the hotel that Zeal mentioned and booked a room. As the old clerk handed her the keycard, he said,
"I hope you enjoy your stay, Officer Novastra."
It bothered her. She had given him only her name and presented her cell unit to make the credit swap. But of course, once she tapped her cell on the counter to transfer the codes, her classification as a lieutenant popped up on his screen. She was far too easy to trace. The room was comfortable and fully equipped. She was hungry, tired, and concerned. She had almost an hour and a half to kill before she was to meet Zeal again. She was only hours ahead of any all-points bulletin that might arrive from HQ. Having booked a room, a trace from her landing on 3P would lead directly to 20s Town. With a lot of luck, no bulletin would arrive at all. With a little luck, she had about a 5-hour lead over her adversary, and there was the possibility that she had no luck and less time. She was nervous and anxious. She began to pace the floor. Her thoughts drifted to the sphere, the addiction calling her out. She glared at the bag she had thrown on the bed. If she could use its power to stop all this, if it would work through her to straighten everything out. She picked up the bag and sat down. Alex weighed the sphere-laden sack in her hands. If Admiral Smalls had just sent someone else to verify the legends, if Rawl had chosen differently, she could see Rawl's calm face in her mind. He appeared so comfortable with the whole affair. She wondered what he was doing now, free of the sphere, yet chained to its addiction. As she thought of Rawl, her mind brought up her sphere trip. She could see it, remember it. She could feel the sphere's cool, smooth surface and revive its marvelous reflections. Holding the bag that held its case, she could feel its weight. She leaned forward in the chair, propping herself up on her elbows, and gazed at the pouch concealing the case that secreted the sphere. The wonders of its past rushed through her mind. That powerful religious icon had controlled humanity's move into deep space. It had guided everyone, every action for centuries. She began to lose awareness of herself, her eyes transfixed on the bag. She imagined herself, sphere at her side, guiding and counseling people into actions that would benefit civilization. She and the sphere would make deals, create advancements, and guide populations. They would rid humanity of terrorism. They would eliminate poverty and oppression and abolish avarice and greed. The known galaxy would expand under their tutelage. Alex lost any sense of time and place. She slowly moved the sphere and its wrappings closer and closer to her face until she was resting her forehead against the bag and case. She was not asleep, and yet she dreamed. With the power of the sphere behind her, she would move into the fleet. Once inside, with the sphere as her guide, she would root out her adversary. She would find them and remove them, perhaps even liquidate them for causing her so much grief. Then, with herself at the head of the affiliate, she would covertly begin to unite all the governments of the galaxy. It would take work. It would take power. But she has the ultimate power. The sphere was the power. There would be resistance. There would be fighting, no doubt. It would take lives, but with the power of the sphere, influence over the affiliate, and the strength of the police fleet at her command, the various political systems would bend under her sway. She and the sphere would put an end to political partisanship and squabbling. Once the political systems were united under her dominion, she would begin to unite the people. Everyone would pay homage to the sphere and Alexandria Novastra, uniting all peoples under a single law. All lesser laws and religions would be dissolved. She would rule. She is the keeper. She has the power, and with the power of the police fleet, with the power of the sphere, she could do it. She could unite all the systems, all the peoples. Some would die. Some would have to. Some would ask to, putting up their puny resistance. There would be many wars. She could hear the pounding of the particle beams and graviton bombs. Boom, 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 like rhythmic thuds, as if she was pounding on the door of unity. But nothing and no one would stand in her way. She would be the supreme ruler of the galaxy. She could see it all like a god. Stars scattered through space with transports whizzing to and fro, all controlled, all ordered the way she wanted it ordered, controlled by her and the sphere. The people would sing her praise. She would be Alexandria Novastra, ruler and emperor of the known galaxy. She could hear all the people during Mass and holidays shouting their devotion. Novastra! 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 Novastra, Zeal said for the fourth time as he nudged her on the shoulder. Her fantasy broke like a mirror smashed in slow motion. She quickly pulled away from the bag and looked about the room, bewildered. Zeal, what are you doing here? What time is it? She got up quickly and hastily stuffed the bag in the room safe. I was, supposed to meet you, Zeal chuckled. In a bit less than an hour from now. He had lost his overcoat and hat. He was dressed in a black, loose-fitting jumpsuit that was covered with pockets and cinched at the waist by a cloth belt with a buckle. The pant legs were tucked into the tops of heelless black boots with synth-rubber soles. He grinned. I caught you napping. Not good for a person on the run. She protested. I wasn't napping. She was rattled and confused by her dream. It bothered and upset her. She was concerned that she had unwittingly used the sphere. The surprise of seeing Zeal in her room in his new attire baffled her. Had she actually used the sphere and changed the shape of reality? She doubted that. It was too far-fetched. Trying to pull her way up from her dreams and fears, she felt her way through the current situation. What happened to your coat and hat? Zeal, as relaxed as ever, looked down at his clothes. This is much more comfortable, and it suits my purposes better. The coat and hat are, well, call them a disguise. Alex moved to the kitchenette and with a shaking hand tapped the console for a glass of water. She drank it down quickly and then ran her fingers through her thick hair. Her head slowly cleared. A disguise? Why a disguise? You seem to be able to get around here without any trouble at all. Zeal plopped himself into Novastra's chair, in full control.
I wanted to find you, not the other way around.
In anger, Alex slammed the glass on the counter. There you go again. What is that all about, you finding me? How the hell did you know I was on 3P? He shrugged, letting her heat bounce off of him.
It seems you've got something there.
He casually pointed at the safe. She rushed to the safe, placing herself between it and Zeal. She could see why he had been so hard to catch years ago. He was always one step ahead. He had found her on 3P. He had found her room and entered it without difficulty, and he had already pinpointed her sore spot. She felt violated. You just leave that alone. It's my responsibility. It means nothing to you. From your point of view, it is worthless, so just forget it. She stepped toward Zeal and stood erect to let him know she meant what she said. Then she moved to the bed and sat down, keeping her eyes on him.
Fine by me.
Zeal got up from his chair and in a mildly perturbed tone said,
If you really want me to forget it, I can just leave.
He moved toward the door. No, Alex shouted. I mean, just forget the bag, all right? I still need your help. I'll pay your price or get it somehow. Don't leave yet. Time was ticking away, and Zeal was too close to the source of her problem at the moment. Zeal relented.
All right, then. We'll forget the item for the moment. Though I must admit it gives your story some credibility.
He returned to the chair and sat down, seeming to enjoy himself.
So you need to drop out of the system?
He asked sarcastically. Alex looked him over. Again she marveled at how handsome he was. She was upset at being caught unaware, and she lamented the need to abandon the fleet and join the side of criminals like him, or like he used to be. Yes, you know that now.
It's not that easy, you know.
Zeal sounded much like a teacher would, chiding a pupil.
It'll take credits. It isn't only a matter of buying false codes. You'll have to buy people's memories, too.
Novastra leaned forward, cradling her chin in her hands and crinkling her brow with a puzzled look. He could tell she had not understood, so he explained his lesson.
The people you buy false codes from, the people you will meet almost every day, will need to forget having ever seen you.
She lifted her head in understanding. She was afraid her meager savings would not be enough to get her through this day, much less the next. Zeal was light-hearted. This was old hat to him. He decided to change the subject for the moment, wanting to learn more about Novastra's secret. To do that, he needed to get her to talk, but he also knew she was overwhelmed. He liked it that way. That was one of the reasons for surprising her at her room. Now he needed to make her feel more comfortable. He was beginning to like her. When she had arrested him more than 2 years before, Novastra was just another officer. He had noted that she was quick and clever, a woman very much his equal, he thought back then. But she played for the wrong team. Now, as she was being forced into a life less bound by rules and regulations, Zeal could see the charm in her.
Are you hungry?
He asked calmly.
Let's get out of here and get something to eat.
He rose from the chair. Alexandria looked up with an expression of protest, but he cut her off.
Don't worry about it. I'll cover it, the cost and the credit codes. But you'll owe me.
For the first time in quite a while, Alexandria examined herself. She felt dirty and unkempt. I am hungry. I'm a mess, too. Can you wait while I clean up a bit? Zeal slumped back into the chair with an impatient grunt.
Ugh, it's not going to be one of those 2-hour makeover things, is it?
Alex liked this change from the casual to the fretful. For the first time she had gotten to him. It was not the poke she preferred, but she took what she could get. It gave her a renewed strength and control. Zeal, you've been hanging out with too many party girls. Besides, I don't have the time. We'll be out of here in 10 minutes. She unlocked the safe and began pulling a few things out of her bag, trying to keep the sphere case hidden. When she saw the case, she was drawn to it. Then she stopped and looked over her shoulder at Zeal. Considering him and his talents, she pulled out the entire bag, sphere case and all. She looked at Zeal with expressions of whimsy and mistrust. "You got into my room without breaking down the door. I imagine you could get into the safe as well. I'll keep this with me." She entered the bathroom and locked the door behind her. She put the sphere case on the counter, undressed, and tossed her clothes in the provided dry-clean sonic washer. Just like in Mark's quarters, the water was soothing and caressed her. As the dirt and sweat were washed from her, they carried away some fear and worries. Her current plan was reaching fruition. She had hooked Zeal. Now she needed to reel him in. Once she had a few false codes, even only one, she could begin to really hide from the sphere's rival. And once she could hide, she could begin to unravel the knot and ferret out the affiliate or fleet official that was after her. Knowing who was after the sphere was half the battle in avoiding or perhaps beating them. She toweled off and thought about Zeal. He was quite a character, very self-assured, resourceful, and intelligent, though he appeared self-concerned. But she had to admit he had been fair. She did not approve of his tactics, yet she realized that up to this point her tactics had not been much different. Since she had been given charge of the sphere, she had been deceptive, she had used a friend, broken flight rules, and basically fought for her freedom. A person in Zeal's old career has to do the same things. It might not be as clear-cut as she used to think, the line between right and wrong. It might be a matter of which end of the line you were on, the rod or the hook. Her hair brushed and neat, her clothing fresh and clean, she examined her physical self. Looking in the mirror, she felt better about herself and the circumstances. While she had not been a party girl since her late teens, she did like to look nice for those around her. She put on a little base makeup, a little lipstick and eye makeup, nothing fancy or overdone. It was early evening, and she was going out to eat on a nice resort planet, so she elected to go one minor step further. Using her favorite color, metallic candy purple, she put on her evening stripe. With it fashionably painted in a thin line from her lower left cheekbone rising to her left temple, she checked herself in the mirror again. She liked what she saw and approved of herself, both outside and in. She quickly stuffed the sphere case into her bag, along with all her other odds and ends, and pulled the bag over her shoulder. She unlocked the bath door and stepped out. Zeal was standing at the window, his back toward the bathroom. When he heard the door open, he held his hand out in front of him, palm down. His cell link projected the time on his wrist.
Excellent. 9 minutes and 40 seconds.
With that, he turned around and was quite taken back. He had become used to thinking of Novastra as an officer. Now she was a person, and a good-looking female beyond that. With a pleased look, he raised his hand, pointer finger extended, touching the corner of his right eye, and with a jerk and a mouth click, he pointed at Novastra.
"I approve of the change, sweetheart."
He used an odd accent that reminded Alex of the car automaton. Much to her surprise, Zeal's approval lifted her spirits. When all is said and done, all humans want to be liked and approved of. With the exception of Mark, she had not received much male approval in recent months. Or had it been years? Mark's approval had not counted anyway. He was an old friend, and she, unfortunately, had to use him, and that made her not approve of herself at the time. Feeling more comfortable, she chose to nurture the situation. "You're looking better without the coat and hat, Mr. Katz, and without restraining clamps on your wrists," she added as a little jab. She headed toward the safe to redeposit her bag, but stopped short. She eyed the safe as she clutched the sphere-laden bag. Once again she felt torn between keeping the sphere hidden and keeping it with her. Yet again the desire to keep it close won out. Zeal watched Novastra during her internal struggle. When she displayed her decision to not lock up the sphere, he said,
"Smart."
She looked at him. "I beg your pardon?" Zeal replied,
"The choice to keep the item with you. As you have noted, the fleet may be only hours away, and they will have no difficulty finding this room."
She stood erect and faced him. A smile of understanding grew on her lips as she nodded her head in agreement. The two of them left the room in silence. They walked along the sidewalk quietly. Zeal laid aside his mistrust and was now rapt with curiosity. He was curious about Novastra's secret, and he was curious about himself and the slowly growing feeling he was having for her, a feeling approaching friendship. Alex was feeling free in a way, having left her past behind. She looked ahead to a new and different life. New codes meant a new identity, yet she found herself cloaked with suspicions. She was suspicious about Katz and his interest in her and her secret charge, and she was suspicious about the slowly growing feelings she had for him, a feeling approaching understanding. They walked back to the library and tea club. The library had a few patrons and visitors. Eliza was not behind the counter. They moved past the counter, past some reading tables, and through an archway. The room inside was filled with small, round tables, 4 chairs each. The right-hand wall was all windows looking out on a busy nightlife street of 20s Town. An automaton moved about the room. It was like a mushroom, its umbrella-like dome a little over table height. The whole unit appeared to float inches above the floor. It had 4 appendages that stuck out from its vertical trunk immediately below the dome. As it moved from table to table, it picked up cups and saucers, placing them in a compartment within the mushroom dome with quiet agility. There were only 2 couples seated at 2 tables. Zeal quietly said,
"The tea club. But tea time was hours ago. It'll pick up again around 11.
He moved through the room in a habitual manner. The automaton, spotting new patrons, adeptly wound its way through the tables toward them. When it was about 3 meters from them, it stopped, and in a very polite, masculine voice said, "Tea for..." Zeal cut it off with a raised hand. It paused for a moment, as if it was examining its database, and then moved off without another sound, and continued to clean tables in another area of the tea club. The two of them continued to the back of the tea club room, where there was a door with a sign that read, "Speakeasy." As they approached, Alexandria noticed the dull, low, thumping, pumping sound of music, as if she was outside of some night spot. Zeal kept a steady pace. The door automatically slid open, and the music came rushing out like a blast of wind. They entered, and the door automatically closed behind them. It was a nightclub. The music was pounding away at full volume. There were tables scattered about, a dance floor, and a bar being dutifully tended by a bartender. The room was dark, but accented with table lights and illuminated artwork that hung on the walls. Several people were dancing. Alex spotted a couple making out in the far right corner of the room. Everyone else was seated at a table or at the bar, and all seemed to be enjoying themselves. Zeal turned to Alexandria, and getting close to her ear, he still needed to nearly shout,
"The best bar in all of 3P!"
He moved through the table area and headed toward the bar. Alexandria lagged behind a bit and then followed him. Before Zeal reached the bar, a woman on the dance floor squealed and ran over to meet him. She hugged him around the neck and planted a firm kiss on his mouth. She spoke to Zeal, but Alex could not make out anything over the general din. When she met up with the two of them, the sexy-looking party girl loosened her grip around Zeal's neck. The music changed its pace, and conversation became a trifle more audible. "I see she found you anyway." Unetta glared at Alex. Zeal smiled at Alexandria through the corner of his eye and then turned to Unetta.
"Not really. I found her. Thanks for the tip." There's a little something in your account.
He gave Unetta a peck on the cheek and then gently pulled away from her. Unetta scowled at Alexandria as Zeal spoke.
We've got some work to do.
Alex returned Unetta's glare with an equally menacing look as Zeal continued.
Perhaps later, okay, ladies?
Unetta turned her gaze on Zeal and stepped back with a pretend frown on her face. Okay. Quickly returning to her party self, she bounced to the dance floor again. She shouted back to Zeal, "Don't forget the party!"
If I can make it, I will,
Zeal replied in full voice as he continued on to the bar. The bar's countertop was a slick, black, glass-like material, featureless. Its smooth, glossy surface reflected the lights in the club, giving it a moving, undulating appearance. Behind the bar were shelves lined with bottles of liqueurs, most of them replicas and antiques. The bartender was an automaton. It and the bar were one. The automaton head and torso were only decor and a reference point for the customers, yet it looked absolutely human. When Zeal stepped up to the bar, the automaton moved quickly to him, its artificial arms pretending to wipe down the counter's self-cleaning surface. The illusion was so nearly perfect, anyone not paying very close attention would have thought it was an actual human bartender. "The usual, Mr. Katz?" the bartender asked. Zeal just tapped on the countertop in reply. Almost invisibly thin lines appeared in the bar's surface, and a piece of the bar top slid from view as a new piece of bar surface with a drink on top rose to replace it. Zeal grabbed the glass and then turned to Alexandria.
Care to start off with a drink?
She thought for a moment. Why not? She faced the bartender. Pleiades pleasures. Again the countertop gave way to a new piece of countertop supporting her drink. Zeal looked curiously at her glass.
I've never tried that. What's in it?
Alex picked up the glass, took a sip, and then studied the glass as she savored the drink. As I recall from my academy days, the guy that came up with this was an ancient mythology freak. Pleiades represents the 7 daughters of the ancient god Atlantis. So let's see. With her free hand, she began counting off liquids as she named them. Bourbon, Drambuie, cream de menthe, vodka, coffee liqueur, and rum. The 7th missing daughter is Renarian orange juice. With that, she banged back a good shot of the reddish liquid. Zeal smiled.
I had no idea. You may not need as much help as you think you do.
He took a shot of his bourbon. Alex looked incredulously at him. So I guess you and Unetta have been lifelong friends? Zeal shrugged, smiled at her, and then took another sip of his drink. Alex took a blast from hers and continued. Oh, I get it. Just bosom buddies. Well, I hope she doesn't charge too much for her treacheries, and then, as a final jab, or her midnight treats. The two of them stood at the bar for a while. Alexandria inspected the club, trying to look casual, but eventually she was unable to contain herself. So how much does it cost to have that little information girl keep you informed? Again, Zeal just shrugged, then downed his bourbon and placed the glass on the countertop, which was promptly lowered into the depths of the bar and replaced by a clean piece of counter surface. He said,
Bring your drink.
Zeal headed around the bar toward the back of the club and a door that was marked private. He pulled out his cell and tapped it on a nondescript spot on the back wall. The cell displayed several choices. Zeal scrolled the options list and then tapped at one. The door opened, revealing a smoke-filled, dim room. Stepping inside, the music from the bar was much lower in volume, but audible. In the center of the room was a large round table, lit from overhead by a single hanging light fixture. 8 individuals sat around the table, men, women, earthlings, once earthlings, even a Cainite, all playing cards. The markers scattered about the table represented large sums of credits. There were a few booths along the walls and other smaller tables about the room. Some of these tables and booths had patrons, some playing other games, others talking or drinking or enjoying a meal. Zeal walked around the main table to a booth at the back wall. Alexandria followed and took a place across from him. The booth was comfortable. The benches were well padded and covered with the finest faux leather. The tabletop was the same glossy black glass-like material the bar was made of. The high-backed bench seats connected to an overhang, almost like a roof. The overhang contained 2 vid monitors, a holo projector lens, speakers, and lighting. The structure created a sense of seclusion. The muted music and bar noise, even the robust sounds of the gaming table, were almost inaudible within the booth. Alexandria suspected that anti-phase noise reduction might be employed. The back wall of the booth, which was the back wall of the entire room, contained a console pad. Zeal tapped at it, and the monitors popped on over their heads. They began to play a restored version of an ancient film. Alexandria watched for a bit and wondered if there was a technical problem, as there were no 3D and no colors. However, what really caught her attention was how the lead character looked like Zeal with an overcoat and fedora on. But with that much clothing on and no color or depth perception, any 2 people might look alike. Eliza appeared at the booth as if she came from nowhere. "Zeal, honey, still playing with this toy of yours?" She gave him a sad smile. Zeal patted Eliza on the forearm.
Work is work. My usual for me, sweetheart. How about you, Novastra?
Alexandria looked at the console, hunting for a menu, but could not find one. Being the supreme matron that Eliza was, she understood Novastra's expression. "We have it all, girlie. Just name your choice." Alexandria thought for a second. "A Renarian fruit chef, if the grapes are fresh." Eliza eyed Alexandria. "They're fresh, doll. We don't serve junk here." With that, Eliza looked at Zeal, gave him a wink, and patted him on the shoulder as she left. Zeal watched the vid overhead. Alexandria watched for a time as well. She found it uninteresting. It was so out of date and not her style. However, she did find the lead character fascinating, which, beyond just the hat and coat, reminded her in many ways of Zeal. To keep herself alert, she decided to strike up a conversation. Looking out at the gaming table, "So, what's with the game?"
Perfectly legit, but very, very high stakes. The only reason for the security is that some of these folk would rather their mates or superiors didn't know they were gambling with so many credits.
While he spoke, a small chime sounded twice within the booth. Zeal took his hands from the tabletop. Alexandria mimicked him. The back wall of the booth rose up. A false tabletop slid out from the wall with their meals, and then the wall returned to its original position. While their meals were sliding into place, Zeal spoke frankly.
"And speaking of stakes, you're racking up quite a bill, you know."
Alexandria shot him an annoyed look. "What are you talking about?" Zeal picked up his fork and waved it around.
"The drinks, the food. This booth does not come cheap, but don't worry about that. Just enjoy your meal."
Alexandria took up her fork and tested her salad. The Renarian grapes were indeed fresh, some of the best she ever had. With the first few bites of good, wholesome food, she realized how hungry she really was. She concentrated on her dinner for some time, almost oblivious to her surroundings.
Zeal ate his meal, but spent more of his concentration on Novastra than on his food. After several minutes, as he casually munched on a piece of celery, he said, "Well, you have been on the run for a little while. The first good meal after a few days of dodging and hopscotching is always hypnotic."
Alexandria stopped her feasting, put down her fork and dabbed her lips with the napkin. Leaning back, she smiled at him. "I guess you're right. I had no idea I was this hungry. But do tell your friend Eliza that the food is excellent, and not just because I am starved. I've never tasted better." She picked up her glass, sipped her drink, and then dove back into her salad. Zeal allowed her to enjoy the meal. He wanted her to talk. He wanted her to give up some information about her secret, and for that to happen she would have to be comfortable and relaxed, and perhaps full of Pleiades pleasures. And he half admitted to himself he was enjoying her company. Meanwhile, the card game continued, the dealer's pot growing beyond all reason while the monitors played out an ancient scenario between a private detective, a woman, and an overly large thug. Nearing the bottom of her salad bowl and feeling much more relaxed and comfortable than she had for days, her attention moved from her food to her surroundings. The vid playing overhead was slowly growing on her. The lead character, a handsome man, was in a deal with an overweight elderly man about some statue of a bird. The lead character used arcane phrases like "dickering for the dingus," and kept calling the statue the item, with very much the same tone she had heard Zeal use about her secret. Feeling full of food, warm with drink, and even a bit safe at the moment, she was ready for some casual conversation. "Tell me about these old vids." Zeal's attention was divided between the vid and Novastra.
I got hooked on them when I was a kid. This particular guy is one of my favorites. Him and another actor. Let's see. What was his name? Stewart? No, that was another guy. Willis? No. Will Smith? No, not him. Damn, I can see his face, but I just can't remember his name. Something S.
Zeal rubbed his chin and stared off into the distance the way so many people do when they try to remember something. Then, raising his hand, pointer finger extended, he exclaimed,
"Solo, that's it. No, that was the character's name. Ford, that's it. Harrison Ford. Bogart, Ford, and Downey. They're my favorites."
With his mental search solved, he returned his attentions to the screen and the last of his salad. Alexandria marveled at Zeal. She had never before thought of him as a child. She wondered what kind of child life a criminal like Zeal Katz could have had. "So it was a hobby of yours, collecting vids?" Zeal kept his eyes on the vid for a moment and then tapped the wall console. A chime sounded, the wall rose, and the plates and false tabletop were sucked away. Then 2 drinks, a bourbon and another Pleiades Pleasures, were pushed out of the wall and placed in front of them. Meanwhile, the lead character in the vid was telling a young woman how he would not go over the wall for her, whatever that meant. Finally, Zeal addressed her question.
Well, my dad got me started on them, really. He had collected hundreds of these old vids. Told me they used to call them movies. He told me that hundreds of people would gather together in these large rooms, and all of them would watch the same movie at the same time. Of course, he never did it. That practice died away centuries before he was born. It was just one of those father-to-son history lessons.
Zeal looked down at his drink.
I've given Eliza copies of most of my favorites so I can watch them when I'm here. I guess the vids are the only thing he really left me.
He sat still. Alexandria pulled the bag hiding the case that concealed the sphere close to her. Something happened that she was not prepared for. She and Zeal were connecting in a way she would not have believed was possible. She sipped her drink and quietly put down the glass. She felt compassion for him. "So your dad died when you were young?" Zeal looked directly into her eyes, his expression changing from soft to hard.
Died? No.
He bolted back his bourbon. The two of them sat in silence for a moment. Alexandria was moved. She had found a spot in Zeal that was tender to the touch. She held the sphere tightly, as if to gain comfort from it. She apprehended there might be reasons why people become the people that they are. Zeal could not leave the conversation off like that. The silence was saying far too much for his liking.
What's your story? Good officer gone bad? Taking some bribes? Not that it would bother me any,
he added to keep Alexandria comfortable. Alex regained her strength and remembered that Zeal was no longer that little hurt child. Defensively, she answered, "I haven't gone bad. Well, I'm trying my best not to. I just got this She paused to figure a safe way to answer the question. Let's say I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I didn't ask for this, and I sure don't like the results. Well, it looks like it might not be as bad as I thought it was going to be, so far. As she talked, Zeal regained his composure and focused on the business at hand. Novastra just told him that she had not been looking for the trouble she was in. It had been thrust upon her. Considering her position in the fleet, the item was probably the sole reason for her being on the run. That was useful information to him.
Finish your drink. I'll tap up a new one for you.
He hoped he could get more liquor into her. Just as he reached for the console, the vid overhead stopped and was replaced by the image of Eliza. I hate to break up your party, honey, but it looks like your friend has company. One of the monitors showed the image of 2 police automatons moving through the library. The fleet police automatons are huge and bulky, about 2 meters high, 1 1/2 meters wide, and 2 meters long. They are turtle-shaped, heavy-set models, well-armored and well-armed. They have several retractable appendages they can use for holding perpetrators, opening doors, moving objects, reaching into small places, and the like. They use anti-grav to float above the crime scene, giving them a physical and psychological advantage. Eliza said, I have to open the doors, honey. I can't afford the damage.
I understand. I'll catch you next time around, sweetheart. Thanks.
Zeal darted under the table. He grabbed Alexandria by the ankles and gave her a firm tug. She was caught off guard, slid along the smooth bench seat, and neatly slipped under the table. Zeal pulled out his cell unit, tapped it, and then tapped it against the wall. An air circulation vent on the wall under the table popped open.
Get in,
Zeal commanded. Even as he said this, Alexandria could hear the sound of the gaming room doors opening. She could hear the players getting up from their chairs and complaining, and the distinctive whir of the police automatons moving into the room. Zeal gave her a nudge, and she crawled into the air duct. Just inside, she stopped and turned around to Zeal. My bag.
I've got it,
Zeal whispered as he pushed her forward and scrambled in after her.
To the right,
Zeal breathed as Alex encountered a junction. They were moving rapidly, crawling on their hands and knees. They could hear the commotion of grumbling gamblers as the deep-throated synthetic voices of the police automatons wafted through the air duct. The passage was straight and level. It quickly grew dark, so Alex slowed her pace. Zeal urged her onward. Alex whispered, This is useless. They'll scan these ducts. Zeal whispered back,
You don't think these are real air ducts, do you?
In the dark and confusion, Zeal seized his opportunity. He could not get a look at what was in Alexandria's bag, but he did get a chance to reach inside as he continued to crawl with one hand. He felt a rather ordinary plastic and metal case. He deftly flipped the latch and reached inside. In the case, he felt a round, solid, fairly heavy object. It felt metallic, but it could be any sort of highly polished material. It was crisscrossed with grooves or notches. Perhaps it was a device, perhaps a statue. It was not much to go on, but it was more information than he had earlier. He quickly grabbed his cell unit, pushed it inside the bag and case, and tapped the sphere with it. Within seconds, they had reached a dead end. Alex impatiently asked, What now? Zeal quickly latched the case, pulled his hand and cell from the bag, and then tapped at the cell's surface. Alex could dimly see his face in the light of its small screen. Zeal then reached out and tapped the cell against the wall in front of Alexandria.
Okay, just push,
he said. She placed both hands on the wall in front of her and shoved. The wall gave way, swinging outward and upward. She looked out of the opening and then slid out, legs first. The opening was a few feet above the ground. Zeal came out after her. The opening spilled out into the dead end of a blind alleyway, basically a convenient spot for several of the local shops to store the garbage of the day until it could be carted away. As Zeal got out, he tapped his cell on a spot on the brick wall. The facade lowered back into place, making a perfect match with the existing brickwork, covering their exit. Unless one knew where the hatch was, it would be impossible to find. Zeal handed Alex her bag.
Here, I believe this is yours.
He then sprinted down the alley. He seemed jocular about the whole affair. Alex took off after him. Something about his manner made her aware that he was actually enjoying himself. He was at his best doing exactly what he was doing. She felt the galaxy had been dealt a blow when Zeal elected to become a criminal and not a member of the fleet. When a person has enthusiasm for their work, they usually are very good at it. Unfortunately, Zeal had used his talents running away from police rather than running after criminals. But perhaps that was it. He enjoyed the chase, not the chasing. The alley emptied into one of 20's towns behind-the-scenes streets. Zeal reached the sidewalk a little ahead of Alex. Once on the sidewalk, he stopped, examined his cell again, and returned it to one of his many pockets. Alexandria reached Zeal just as he was putting away his cell.
Excellent. You move well. Fast reaction time, too.
She looked at him and smiled, more approval for her to digest. Thanks. Coming from you, that means something. The behind-the-scenes residential areas of 3P are like the residential areas of any planet. There are fewer luxuries, but perhaps more casual comfort. Zeal strolled down the sidewalk. It appeared to Alex to be a main street for the employees of the surrounding attractions. There were small shops for everyday items and sundries, apartment complexes, condos, and diners. The sidewalks were well lit. It was early enough that a few people were out, walking or having a late dinner, yet late enough that the street was not very busy. Thanks for the help, Zeal. I appreciate it. Alex felt closer to him. He had used his skills and his tools to help her, and she knew it. Zeal grinned.
Wait until you get the bill. As I told you, that booth is not cheap.
He was walking a steady, deliberate pace. He was erect and looking forward, looking proud. Alex was becoming anxious. Well, about that bill. She shot looks over her shoulder and around the street. Let's get out of view and settle it. Give me some false codes. I'll pay you and then get off this planet. We're walking targets out here.
What do you mean, we're walking targets? You're a target, not me. I'm as clean as sunlight.
He smiled at Alex as he picked up his stride. Her anxiety grew. What about what just happened? You ran from the police automatons, she said, pointing over her shoulder. Zeal blew the whole event off.
So what? It isn't against the law to run from the police unless you are wanted by them. They don't want me.
She understood his point. She began to calculate her next move, but before she could devise a proper approach, Zeal said,
All right, you and your little item need to drop out of sight. You need false codes. Once you have them, what are your plans?
Alexandria paused to think and then said, I think the first order of business would be to determine who is after me, and then to try and figure out what I can do to prevent them from chasing me. They continued to move briskly down the street while the rest of the town went about its normal life. Zeal looked up, thinking,
You'll need a new ship most likely. The ship and the codes I can get for you, but I already have a lot invested in you. Probably more than you can cough up right now. The automatons are already reporting in, and in a few minutes this whole town will be probed from the air. Your item can be scanned, at least from a close distance. Do you know if the fleet can recognize its emissions?
Alex was surprised. I don't know. I didn't even know it gave off any detectable patterns. She had never considered the possibility. From the moment Admiral Smalls had given her the assignment, she thought of the sphere as a religious icon. She had not found any information that led her to believe it was a real, material thing with energetic properties. When Rawl presented it to her, despite the fact that the sphere became a solid physical object, she still continued to think of its power as religiously based, as magical. wall said the case disguised it from most scanners. She didn't take time to consider the deep scans that the fleet and apparently Zeal are capable of. It never occurred to her that it could be scanned or probed on some level. She thought for a second, and her surprise turned towards mistrust. How did you know it emitted detectable patterns anyway? She was feeling violated again. Zeal reached into one of his pockets and produced his cell. He tapped its surface a few times, and as he studied it, he casually spoke.
My dad told me these things, the whole cell and cell link system, started out as something they called phones centuries ago. Imagine only being able to talk to people with them. I've seen it in a lot of those old vids you scoff at. They would hold them up to the ear like this.
He demonstrated the concept and then resumed studying his screen.
They started to add some computing capabilities. Over the centuries, science has added projectors and sensors and a host of gadgets. Now we couldn't live without them. They can do almost anything with the right programs and attachments.
He stared sternly at the screen and then lengthened his stride to increase his speed, though he avoided entering into a trot.
Use your head, detective. You're smarter than that, and I know it.
Zeal turned a corner and led Alex down a smaller behind-the-scenes road. This was purely a residential area, nice little homes with nice little yards. They passed 2 houses, and then Zeal headed up to the door of the third. Holding his cell between his thumb and pointer finger, he placed the 3 remaining fingers and a corner of the cell on a panel, and the door opened. Once they were both inside, Zeal went to a computer console in the main living area and deftly began input gesturing, tapping, dragging, and pushing. With the last tap, he raised his hand with finality, like a composer finishing a masterwork.
There. We are shielded against EM band transmissions. The arrows are just starting to cover the area, so we were not spotted directly by the police, though doubtless someone saw us walking. As for me, that won't matter, except that puts me in contact with you.
Alex looked around the place. The decor was very nice. It had an eclectic style that bordered on elegance. The entry room, which was also Zeal's main living quarters, was voluminous. In the center of the room was a vast wraparound sofa and a lucite coffee table suspended either by anti-grav or repulsor beams. The left wall was a profusion of electronic machinery. Each device had its own little niche built right into the wall. There were several monitors of differing sizes, holoprojector lenses, speakers, a few computer consoles, scanners, recorders, and several other devices Alex could not identify. The room did not have a back wall. It opened directly into a dining and kitchen area. The remaining walls were tastefully adorned with artwork, each piece illuminated by recessed overhead lighting. Like the furniture, the artwork was of many different styles. Here an excellent copy of a Matisse, there what looked like a Fila Unda original, there a 20th or 21st century piece of neon art. It was a wonderful little house, but it did not make sense. Her fleet training picked up all the little pieces she had been collecting. Wait a minute. How can you afford all this, Zeal? The house, the special spot in the library and tea club, the toys. She pointed to the electronics array, and then added, the busty info girl. You're an ex-con 2 years off a Penn asteroid. Where do you get the credits for all this? He looked at her blandly.
Where do you think?
She headed toward the sofa and flopped down on it. You're still working, of course. Stealing from corporations and the rich, what else? She felt a little hurt. She had hoped that Zeal had actually changed, that he had accepted a new life and lived near the criminal types only to keep a sense of continuity with his past. The idea that he was still stealing for a living was a cut. It was a shallow cut with a double-edged blade because she was now a criminal as well, or might as well be. Zeal smiled and let out a chuckle. Sorry, he said when Alexandria shot him a look of disgust. It's a private joke. He sat down in a high-back faux leather chair that was in front of his electronics wall.
All right, I will answer your question. Not because I have to, but because I want to see the expression on your face when I do. But I don't think now is the time to get into it. You see that monitor?
He pointed to one of his screens.
That is a map of this area.
As he talked, he would gesture, creating red circles, lines, or dots on the map, or pushing the map this way and that, zooming in and out.
This is 20s, Sexborough, and the residential. We are here. These targets are police arrows. These are cops' eyes. These are automatons, and these are foot patrols.
He swiveled the chair around so he was facing Alexandria. He leaned forward and interlocked his hands.
They cannot probe in here right now, but soon they will wonder why they can't. They know me, well, most of them do. They know I'm clean, but they also know my past, and as I have pointed out, someone on the street may have seen us together. I'm not able to buy everyone's memory. You said you would try to find whoever is after you. Frankly, I thought the fleet was your problem.
Alexandria got up from the sofa and began to pace the floor. Well, it is, but it's just a tool, I think. She accepted that she would have to tell him more than she had planned. I believe that some fleet or affiliate official is after me. I have never done anything that would put me on a wanted list, so I'm assuming they have trumped up some charges so they can use fleet channels to find me. Zeal leaned back in his chair and casually swiveled back and forth.
It gets more intriguing all the time. So with false codes, you could drop out of the system, making it harder for the fleet, and thus the affiliate, to keep tabs on you. Then what?
He rested his elbows on the arms of his chair and built a steeple over his chest with his hands as he calmly contemplated her reactions and answers. There is nothing I can do on 3P except try to avoid the fleet. My plan is to find the official that is after me. Once I find out who it is, it might be easier to protect myself or even stop them. She mentally kicked herself. She'd almost slipped. She sat down to help maintain some composure. Though she had a little trust in Zeal, she still needed to think and watch her words more closely.
Okay, I don't understand everything about your situation, but I'll buy that. Where would you go?
Zeal remained calm. He did not look at Alexandria as much as he seemed to be looking inside his head, as if he were weighing each piece of information against some other strategy. I think Earth would be the place to start. As I said, I believe it is either a fleet or affiliate official that is after me. The orders that got me in this mess originated from there. Fleet and affiliate headquarters are there. If the individual isn't there, a trail to them is. Zeal sorted through all the information. He knew that Alexandria had been thrust into her current dilemma, and now he knew that the thrust came in the form of orders. She might have been set up, she might have been used, or the orders may have gone awry, or she may have made an executive decision somewhere along the line. Her little slip made it clear that the item was indeed the source of her trouble. That fact, along with her reputation as a by-the-book officer, caused Zeal to bend toward the idea that she had found herself dealing with a set of orders that she believed wrong or improper. At least that was the way he was leaning, though he did not rule out any of the other possibilities. He swiveled and thought for seconds.
So I was correct earlier. In addition to false codes, you'll need a new ship.
Well, what's wrong with mine? Can't I get a false AODT?
Yes, but the ship narrows down the search parameters. They know the make and model of your ship. Hell, they probably already have it locked down.
Alex nodded her head with understanding. She knew that would be a possibility. Zeal stopped swiveling, leaned forward, elbows on knees again, and faced her.
Okay. It is just a matter of time before the local fleet will come knocking on that door. Now, here's the deal, and I think you will find this hard to refuse. I will help you solve your problem by helping you find whoever is after you. I'm doing this for 3 reasons.
As he stated each of his reasons, he displayed its number with a raised finger.
The first I have explained. I am now connected to you. I've got to help you get your mess cleaned up so I can keep my current reputation neat. The second reason is that you now owe me a whole lot of credits. I don't want you getting into a position so that I cannot collect. Third, to be honest, all this has me rather curious, and you're growing on me. Don't ask me to explain it, but for the moment, hanging around you is sort of fun.